I'm Sarah Adams, and this is Go Time.
It's Go Time, a weekly podcast where we discuss interesting topics around the Go programming language, the community, and everything in between. If you currently write Go or aspire to, this is the show for you. All right, everybody, welcome back for another episode of Go Time. This is episode number 5. Today we have Brian Kettleson here. Say hello, Brian.
I'm not here, though. I'm in San Francisco this week. Hello.
Yeah, that's very true. You're part here. You're not here anyway. This is all virtual studio.
That's true.
We also have Carlicia here.
I am not there. I am in San Diego. Hello, everybody.
And today on the show, we have a special guest with us, Sarah Adams, who most of you know as an engineer, speaker, and also the founder of Women Who Go.
Hi.
How are you, Sarah?
I'm in the city too, San Francisco.
So is everybody in California but me today?
That's correct.
Sounds like it.
I knew I was getting left out here.
You have some serious FOMO going on, Eric. Fear of missing out.
But see, I'll be having dinner before you guys, though. I have less work when we're done.
You know, the problem with being out here is that my kids start sending me text messages at 3 a.m.
Oh, no.
Yeah, that's always rough to get kind of like synced up with the kids and family. The whole thing is, you think 3 hours isn't that long, but it's a lifetime.
It's a lot. It is.
It's like everybody's going to bed before you're having dinner, and everybody's like having lunch when you're waking up. All right. What's that?
We've got a lot to talk about this week. I think we should dive in. There's a lot happening.
Yeah, so last week we talked a bit about the 1.7 stuff and some of the performance change improvements there. And over this past week, Dave Cheney put together some visualizations of that, which really kind of blew my mind because I knew there was improvements, but we've cut less than half or more than half the difference between 1.4 and 1.6.
Yeah,
out of the way. So
we're halfway back to where we were. Which is fabulous because Go has really great compile times, and it's nice to see that coming back down to insanely great.
And then I'm looking forward to seeing it less than 1.4. That'd be a great achievement. Imagine being even faster than 1.4 was.
Is it even possible? Is it on the cards though?
Anything's possible with SSA. And have you seen the team working on that? The brain trust will make it happen. I have confidence.
Who's working on it?
I'm trying to think of who's specifically working on that functionality. See, that one, do you remember, Brian, who the specific team was working on the SSA stuff?
I don't know the whole list of team. No.
So we'll look that up and then we'll put it in the show notes.
So other big news this week, the context package is now going to be in standard lib. This is huge. I'm so excited about it. And the way
I'm really excited.
The way that they've engineered it is really nice too. So that if you're using 1.7, it'll use the one in standard lib, and if you're not using 1.7, it will continue to use the one in the net package. So that's really awesome.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, that's fantastic because gRPC and all that stuff depends on the context package, and we've been using that for I don't even know how long that's been floating around. I'm really glad to see it kind of pulled in. And Sarah, you were saying something about the context package?
I'm just excited for it to be in the standard library. It's just a cool addition.
Yeah, and hopefully a lot more people will start using it as part of their packages where they expose kind of network requests and things like that. Because that's really the power in it, is having the context kind of forwarded along so that you can stop it anywhere in the process.
So all you library developers out there, if you're not putting context as the first parameter of your public functions, now is a great time to start doing that, please.
And the emphasis
Please.
is
Well,
on
I
please.
wanted to say please. I don't want to sound too bossy. I can come across that way sometimes.
And from my little
No.
experience, from the little experience that I have with Go, I see a lot of times when people use other network packages just so they can get the context. And I would even do that because I don't want to do that stuff by hand. But now that it's in the standard library, I wonder if it's going to impact the usage of other external libraries, or if people are just going to have to keep ahead and keep adding more features to make it more attractive for people to use them.
But I mean, is it really a competition though? You know, I think at the end of the day, it's about writing good quality software and that's readable. And I think that by having external libraries that people really like, I mean, and we kind of get consensus on these patterns, I think it's okay to pull that stuff in because not everybody's going to be aware of these things, despite how much visibility we think they have. Whereas people find stuff in the standard library, that's generally where people look first. So I think it's a hard debate, right? We're kind of pulling away users from some standard library, but I think that the library owners are probably glad to see it there because I think it'll get more love in the standard library too.
It'd certainly be easier to use.
Yeah, I wonder how the Gorilla toolkit is going to change because of this, because they've implemented their own network context, I think. I haven't used it in a while.
Yeah, Gorilla has its own context, and every other MUX on the planet has its own context. I'm really excited about them not having their own contexts. I hope that they all converge to use the standard lib context.
That's actually really interesting. I hadn't even considered that. I mean, I've used the Gorilla MUX in the past couple of years, but I don't think I've used anything else from the Gorilla stuff in a while. So that'll actually be really interesting to see how that's adapted to this.
Yeah, and I think the Gorilla MUX even imports its own Gorilla context, like within the MUX package. So it'll be interesting to see if they go forward with the Go standard library context.
We should email them and ask.
Yeah.
Open a issue on the GitHub repo.
Maybe one of their developers is one of the two listeners. All right. So one of the other projects that I've been using recently is Vendor Check. And I noticed that they got an update that now tells you your deprecated dependencies, which is awesome. So basically it goes through your vendored path. And
nice.
it's just a -u flag. And it'll tell you all your unused.
This is interesting because we talked about the blog post that this originated from in our last episode, the Cloudflare blog post about creating the simplest possible SSA tools. So Vendor Check was an extension of that, and it's nice that it's getting some very usable features. It'll be good to get that vendor directory pruned as needed.
It sounds to me almost like Vendor Check should be right side by side with FUMPT.
Yeah, and Go imports.
It's definitely a must-have tool.
Yeah, and I think that the vendor stuff is probably early for that stuff to kind of get pulled in, at least adopted by the Go team, right? Because, I mean, it's only been recently that there's been kind of this agreement that maybe the Go tooling should handle vendoring more. So it'll be interesting to see how much they think should be pulled in. But I imagine we'll start seeing tools like VimGo and all that jazz incorporating in this and some of like the meta tooling. But there's a Go meta linter and stuff like that runs all the suite of different tooling.
I can totally see that happening too.
So on that note, on the idea of having vendor tooling being built into Go itself, I know that Andrew Durand was talking about sponsoring a talk or a panel discussion on the Hack Day at GopherCon on the 13th of July for an hour or so, talking about packaging and vendoring. So if you've got strong opinions on that, you might want to come to Denver in July and get together and talk to the Go team directly about package management and vendoring. That would be a great opportunity to have your voice heard.
And strong opinions in general. I know that they're wanting to do kind of a panel discussion, or not panel, but a collaborative session with big Go users and kind of seeing what pain points are there and how people feel that the Go team and can ease those pains and make it easier to adopt and use Go, or easier, I should say.
And on that topic, there is an issue opened on the Go repo where they just pull in everybody's opinion into one place. At least they put links to things. And it's probably something good to read through if you are going to go to this event and discuss. So you have all the information.
It's a really long issue.
Yeah, it's huge, but it's not the Go team endorsing any way or another, but any opinion or another or other is just gathering everybody's opinion in one place and giving it as it is. Okay, this is what people are saying. Let's just have it here. So we're not replicating this all over the place. So we have a starting point. We don't have to go back and talk about things that were already talked about. So it's all in there. It's very, very interesting.
I'll have to pull that up when I have a weekend.
It's
or however long
longer
that
than
thing
a weekend.
is.
Yeah,
I can only imagine.
Yeah.
It's plain time, travel
and
time.
it's not like light reading. It's very thoughtful expressions of how things could be done technically. I'll find it. I'll find the link.
Awesome. So on a sad news side of things, did anybody see the email that Rob Miller sent out to the Heka mailing list?
I did.
No, what?
Very, very sad.
Yeah. Yeah. So Rob Miller works for Mozilla on a tool called Heka. How would you best describe Heka, Brian?
Heka's a stream processing tool that you can use to take inputs and process them and munge them and do strange things with them and send them back out to other places. So it's one of the most common use cases for Heka would be log aggregating and management, but it's significantly more complicated than that. But that's probably the best use case for it is moving logs from here to there.
Yeah, it's basically like a pipeline, and there's different inputs you can swap out. So collectors and emitters and things like that. So you can take inputs from various different types of systems, and you can output to various types of systems. There was a really interesting project, and he presented it at GopherCon 2014. And I mean, by all accounts, it seems like people are using it, but I think he's been primarily the core maintainer of it. And they're using something else internally at Mozilla, and he hasn't had the time and is going to continue to have less time. So I think that's probably going to be, I don't know whether deprecated's the right word for it. But
discontinued Mozilla support, perhaps, or Mozilla sponsorship.
And I think that they're open to somebody else taking over the project, but they don't have the time to help facilitate that takeover either. And I think he expressed some concerns about even the patterns it was designed under, that the channel, the way they were using channels wasn't quite hitting the performance levels that they were wanting and things like that. And he kind of believed that there'd be some heavy refactoring. And maybe we can get him on the show and talk about it a little bit more in depth, what his thoughts are.
That'd be a great idea. We'll link to the mail list announcement in our show notes. And it's way too long to discuss here, but the main takeaway from the email that he sent out was that the refactoring required to make Heka perform significantly better than it does now, which is actually really solid performance. But to get to that next level, it would require less use of channels. And that's probably a good show topic for us at some point, is talking about the performance of channels under significant load, and when channels are great and when they aren't.
That would be an amazing topic. I'm sure a lot of people can benefit. I can benefit from it.
So before we get into some discussions about all the things that Sarah is doing these days, we typically go through some interesting Go projects, because Brian just is full of just this encyclopedia of projects. But before we go into that, we don't need Brian anymore. Have you guys seen the lib hunt thing that was going around?
No.
There's now the Go lib hunt. It's go.libhunt.com. And you can basically browse around, categorize projects and libraries in Go, and they kind of rank them.
Just because somebody lists a bunch of libraries in Go does not replace my curation, Eric. The added value that I bring every week to the curation of cool projects is what's important here. You cannot replace me with a bash script.
We can try.
Brian, what's your process? How do you find new Go projects?
Before I go to bed every night, I look at Reddit, the Golang Reddit thing, just to see if there's anything interesting there. I don't get a lot out of Reddit these days, but I have a special query on GitHub that I use to see recently updated or recently created Go projects, and I just scan through them looking for things that sound exciting that I haven't seen before.
And that query can be yours for just 3 easy payments of $59.90.
Exactly. And actually, I'd be happy to post that query in the show notes too, because there's nothing magic to it. It's just a really long GitHub query.
Yeah, I used to use. I had an app. It wasn't called Stumble Upon, but it was something like that, where it acts like Stumble Upon, where you can look through and you can have filters like a Go project or whatever. It looks through GitHub and like helps you stumble upon Go projects that are relatively popular. That's pretty cool.
That's nice. All of those queries are prone to error because if GitHub's detection of the project type isn't accurate, because maybe you don't have any Go files in the root or whatever they use to detect the projects, they might be excluded, and is
that common?
It is. I've seen projects that don't list themselves as the primary language that they are, just because whatever GitHub uses to detect that was thwarted by maybe their directory layout or whatever.
I'm not sure how that detection works. I mean, whether it's like what percentage of the code base is in what, because I mean, if you had like, say, Grafana, right? That's a bunch of Go, but it's a whole lot of web stuff too, HTML and CSS and JavaScript too. So is there more of one than the other, and does that cause
I have always
false
wondered
positives?
that too. If somebody knows, please.
You can also specify when you're creating a repo what language the project is. Well, I think it just helps them generate the git ignore.
I've never seen that.
Interesting.
But I'm not sure if they keep that data.
Yeah, I wonder if they store that as metadata. I've never done that specifically, so I don't know.
Like Sarah said, I think I've only used it once just to generate the git ignore.
So now that Eric has tried to replace me with a website, it's
the
time
pressure is on.
Yeah, the next segment of our show is where we each talk about interesting Go projects that we've perhaps stumbled upon in the past week. And I'll start, since I'm bringing the most value here. I'm really angry with you, Eric, now. This isn't going to fly. So the thing I found this week that I thought was really cool was a combination of one that I talked about previously, which was Minio, S3 object storage clone that you can deploy on your own hardware or on the cloud somewhere, that gives you an S3 compatible object storage pool. And another project that is awesome, which is Kubernetes. So the Deis team, Deis is a platform as a service on top of Kubernetes. They created a Minio storage plugin for Kubernetes. So you can use Minio S3 storage for your Kubernetes cluster. And it's got some really tight integration with Kubernetes. Looks really awesome. So two great tastes that taste together. They taste great together again, which is Minio and Kubernetes. That's at github.com/deis/Minio.
So I will go next. So I saw this a while back, and I think it was really in its infancy, which is Lime Text, which is like a Sublime Text clone, but written in Go. And it's actually been coming along quite well. And I was actually curious whether Carlicia had tried it, because I know you're a Sublime user, right, Carlicia?
No, I'm not.
I thought you were a Sublime user.
I use Sublime.
I've used it, but I stopped using it long ago.
I haven't heard of Sublime.
Have you checked it out, Sarah?
No, I haven't. I'm looking at it right now.
Yeah, so this is actually pretty interesting, because, I mean, you can't get me away from Vim, but I feel like if you could, it might be Sublime. And this makes it kind of enticing because if I wanted to modify the editor, I could actually do it in Go.
Well,
Yeah,
it's interesting from another perspective in that it's almost modeled on the Emacs and NeoVim server and client model. So the Lime Text app has a back end, and then it can have multiple front ends. So you could actually use a command line app to use Lime Text, or they've got a Qt based editor for a graphical environment, but the back end stays the same. So that makes it unique, I think, in terms of Go based text editors. That certainly made it more interesting to me.
I do want to check it out, though. Yeah, I'm an Atom user. I use it with the Vim plugin, but this looks cool.
I don't know why I thought you used Sublime, but now I remember Atom because you did bring up a new set of plugins for Atom. That wasn't last episode.
Yeah.
It was the episode before.
Well, these editors look a lot the same in a lot of ways. So,
I can't keep up with all the new editors.
Sarah, do you have a Go project you wanted to mention?
Feel free to say no.
No, I didn't. I didn't prepare one.
So I'll go next. I found there's a HDR histogram, and it's not something I have used, but I can see myself using it. It keeps track of a sample count of basically incoming requests, how many simple count of incoming requests that you have, and then you can specify what it is that you want to look at over time. And
so this is showing like a request per second over time, or?
I think it's requests per second.
I've used this package before. I think it's more generic than just requests per second. I think it's actually just a histogram package that you can use to collect metrics about any particular event and then present them in a histogram. So request per second is a great example of how you would use it if you were collecting metrics on a website.
Exactly. It looks like that. It's configurable. But the interesting, the way that I found about this was because, and they have a package, they have a Go version of this. And the way I found about this and why it's relevant is because I saw a talk by Jill Teen, I don't know if that's how it's pronounced, on Strange Loop from last year. And he was talking about how network graphs usually show us the 9.5 percentile of the worst response times that you get. And he goes on to talk about in detail about how meaningless that is and how much it hides the information that you really want to see, which is the actual count, the actual max. And he also goes on to talk about the difference between service time and response time. And it's fascinating because you kind of know, but I don't know. I don't usually think about it in those terms, but yeah, it makes total sense. It's a fascinating talk. And if you want to monitor your stuff and what you are using is the usual commercial tools that are out there, maybe you should check this out. That's it. We'll have links.
And will you put that link in the show notes?
Yes,
that sounds like a great talk.
I already did. There it is.
Perfect.
So Sarah, one project that we would love to hear you talk about is your Test2Doc.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
That's really cool.
Oh, thanks. So I got this idea like a year and a half ago. I was maintaining a REST API for, I was working for a company called Sproutling, and we were building a wearable baby monitor. And so I was building a REST API that had multiple clients. We had custom hardware, which was sort of a base station that was monitoring room temperature and stuff in the baby's room. We had an iOS app, which was a second client, and we had a web app, which was a third client. And so we had multiple developer teams working on each of these. And so since I was the only person responsible for the REST API, well, not because of that, but I needed to have API documentation, of course. So I started using Apiary because I liked the format. You can write it in Markdown, and their specification, the API blueprint specification, is open source, which is nice. But I kept so for larger changes like adding an endpoint or deleting an endpoint. Those were easy to remember to update the documentation. But for smaller things like deleting an attribute on or all the way down to like deleting a column on a database table would trickle up to the endpoint change, which would mean the field was missing on the JSON response. Those smaller changes started to add up a lot. And so my documentation was often really inconsistent with the actual API. And so I started I forked a tool called Dread, which is meant for testing your documentation against your actual API. And it was pretty good, but I had to sort of periodically just run this and update all of the documentation. And so I started to get really frustrated because my unit tests were all there. They were all like, if only my fellow engineers could read my Go unit tests and use that as documentation, like that would have worked great. And so I realized that all of the information that you need for API documentation is in the endpoint handler tests. And so I decided I was just going to record the requests and responses as the test ran and put them in a markdown file in the appropriate format, and then be able to generate all of my API documentation and host it and have everything be automated. So I would never have to worry about out-of-date documentation and angry developers and people asking me questions and things like that. So that's sort of where that came from.
So when you're writing your tests, how much differently do you write your tests to make the documents look appropriate? Do you have to? Not at all. Not at all.
It's super simple. There's like maybe 6 lines of code that you have to add. But essentially, if you have really good, really thorough unit tests, like testing for user passes nil and user passes, a post with no request data, and all of that, all of those tests are captured, and so you can see in the documentation when you pass nil, this happens. So the tests are really just like if this is the request, that the user sends, what should the appropriate response be? And that's exactly what documentation is also.
That's really interesting. Now, so how do you have that implemented? You're statically analyzing the tests?
No. So I have actually I wrote this bit a while ago, but I think I used the HTTP test.
Okay, like they're like response recorders and stuff like that?
Yeah, so I actually, during the test, I paused the test right before like the actual test executes, and copy the request body from just from the request object itself, and put that into a buffer somewhere, then execute the test, and then copy the response data before we actually return, and put that into the buffer as well. And then when the full test suite is finished, flush that buffer to a file in the appropriate format. And there are some other intricacies like pulling out request URL variables, so that in the documentation, like for example, if you're testing get widgets with ID 1 and then get widgets with ID 2, those would naturally be 2 separate URLs. So trying to figure out how to match those 2 together. And notice that the 1 and 2 are actually variables. So there's some intricacies with that. Same with query parameters.
Is this does this support header logic too?
Yep. Yeah. All your headers are logged also to the same buffer, and they're written in the appropriate format for the API blueprint.
Oh, that's really awesome. I kind of want to play with this.
Yeah, it is awesome. I love it. I use it at work.
And then is there a way kind of to augment the documentation? So things that aren't necessarily captured by monitoring the requests and responses, things that you might want to take notes on, like what appropriate values are or things like that? Yeah.
So for each package, a API-B file is spit out. And so what you actually need to do is have sort of I call it like a template, but it's really just the description of your API and sort of high level things like that. Those go at the top of the API-B file. So once all of your tests have run, you'll get back one API-B file per package, and so you need to combine them. And so during that step, you could actually insert. So for my current company, we have a list of all of our errors and our error codes at the top of our documentation file. And so that's generated right before we append all of the APIB files. So yeah, it's totally flexible.
Oh, that's cool.
And what's the process for this? Like, do you just, you run this tool after you're done so that you're kind of committing this documentation?
Yeah, so how I have it built into our CI flow. So you push up some code on a feature branch, and when it's ready to land into the development branch or whatever you use, master, you land that in, and then we have a special hook that says, oh, if I'm on the master branch, I need to run the sort of combine APIB file script and push that up to how I have it is I push that up to a separate branch, a docs branch on our repo, and then have API actually read that file to show like the parsed, beautiful API documentation.
Nice.
I just thought about making this, having it also, or something, another tool, make a diff between the pushes, so you can see like a changelog version. That would be really cool.
Yeah, that would be cool. And there are a lot of things that I want to add to this. Like a couple of people have requested Swagger support, and I think it's probably more common than API for API documentation.
Swagger has really blown up lately.
Yeah. The interesting thing about Swagger, though, is they seem to want you to generate your sort of handler skeletons. And so I'm not really sure how that fits into this sort of test generates docs flow, because really what they want you to do is have a spec generate the code. So it's sort of cyclical. If I don't know, yeah. So I'm not really sure how that's going to work, but I haven't played with it yet, so we'll see.
Yeah, they kind of fit in different parts of the workflow, right? Like
yeah,
you said,
exactly.
Swagger kind of you build to the specification and it spits out code, and it knows that it meets it. Whereas this tool kind of comes in after the fact and kind of gets insight into how your API works.
Exactly. So it's a different workflow.
Here's the perfect workflow. You run you do your specs, you run it, you spit out the Swagger docs, you run the Swagger docs, and that auto-generates your code.
But I think this is interesting though, because people love Swagger, but everybody likes building their APIs in different ways, and we see that prevalent in like all the number of frameworks out there for building APIs right now. But yours, it doesn't have any ties into those specific, right? You could write in whatever you wanted to and have similar documentation to Swagger, and I think that's an awesome idea.
Thanks.
Yeah, the one issue I can see with trying to make it fit in with Swagger is that Swagger has it has a specification. So it's strict in that way. And if you design something that is not supported, it's not necessarily they wouldn't be RESTful, but is not supported by that spec version that you're working with, then it just doesn't work.
Well, API Blueprint has a pretty strict spec also. You just have to match sort of the data. You have to like really evaluate the spec and match the data, fit it into the spec.
Yeah, so you have to have some prior knowledge of what the spec is for the tool you're working with.
Sure.
All right, so I think we got about 10 minutes left, and I definitely don't want to close the show out without getting a chance to speak with you about your Women Who Go initiatives. Awesome. So could you tell us a little bit about that and kind of how things are going there?
Yeah, sure. We're actually growing really fast at the moment. I'm sort of blown away. It's really exciting. We just launched a chapter in Tokyo, so that's really cool. So, I mean, I could talk about like why I started it or how I started it.
Talk about a little bit about what it is and kind of how it got started and what your goals are.
Yeah, sure. So I really wanted to create a safe space for women to enter the Go ecosystem. So I started the group about a year ago, and I had been going to Go SF meetups since like mid 2013. So when they were still really small, like 50 people or something. or 30. And I was often like the only woman, like very consistently. And so I started to get a little frustrated, but the meetups were so excellent that it worked out okay. Then let's see, I got accepted to talk at GopherCon early 2014, and I was actually listening to a changelog podcast about GopherCon, and I think it was Brian who I can't actually remember. Someone asked a question like, how can we help people get more involved in the Go community, or how can something like that? And Brian suggested that you start a group in your community, like a Go group in your community. And I sort of took that as my community being like women. And I wanted to get more women involved in Go. And so I started Women Who Go. See, we had our first event about a year ago, which was really, we just talked about sort of difficulties of being a woman in tech and a woman in the Go community, and sort of how can we start trying to fix these issues. And I've had a meetup about every month for a year. And I think our largest event has been the Bill Kennedy workshop. We had 70 women attend and want to learn Go, which was really powerful. But yeah, the main goal of the group is just to provide a safe environment for women to learn more about Go, to explore. And hopefully the idea is that then they go to Go SF events or GopherCon once they feel a little more safe. And I think it's been working pretty well. So, and then as far as like our 10 chapters around the world, women actually will message me or somehow find me on Twitter, and they'll be like, I see what you're doing and this is really cool. I want to start a group in Denver or, wherever. And I just help them get started, and they really run with it. And so the number of women that have been really excited about starting groups like this has been really spectacular.
That is so awesome to hear.
Yeah.
I'm just all verklempt over here, so keep talking.
Oh, well, I mean...
So you said you have 10 chapters now, right?
Yes, we do. So we've got 5 in the U.S. We've got one in Bangalore, one in London, one in Tokyo. Shoot, I'm blanking. I've got if you go to womenwhogo.org, you can see our list of chapters. And there are also resources for if you want to get involved, but you don't identify as a woman. Yeah, so we've got Berlin, Bangalore, Tokyo, Mexico City, and London. And then in the U.S., we've got Boston, Boulder, New York City, San Diego, and San Francisco. Is
there information on womenwhogo.org for people who might be interested in starting their own chapter?
So not explicitly, but people have found the hello at Women Who Go email address there, and that's usually how they contact me.
Perfect.
So I suppose I could say on the site, like, if you want to start a chapter.
I think it's great when things kind of grow bigger than you can keep track of anymore. They just kind of like,
it's amazing.
Yeah.
Especially when it's such a cool cause, trying to get more women into Go.
I mean, this is probably the first community that I've been a part of that had at least visibly had these big women only, I want to say women only, but, advocating more women get into the community.
Yeah.
And they probably exist, but it definitely didn't feel as prevalent as it is here. I mean, I've been watching kind of Twitter and seeing the new Women Who Go chapters and stuff like that. And it's like, wow, like I can't even keep up with how many there are anymore. And I think that's fantastic.
It's awesome. There are a few meetups that I've been to, like Pythonistas, and Women Who Code has a Ruby Tuesdays for women. But I haven't come across any other sort of women's group specific to a programming language that is spread across multiple chapters.
Yeah, I've seen Ladies Who Linux.
That's right.
Gotten bigger. And there's an InfoSec one too. And for the life of me, I can't remember the name of it. But
there's also PyLadies.
Oh, yeah, PyLadies.
PyLadies, Rails Girls.
Oh, true. Yeah. So there's a ton.
But it feels stronger in the Go community, and I love that. I love the push to have that inclusivity and that feeling of safety, so anybody can come in and learn without worrying about external factors. That's very nice. So be proud of what you've done. This is really cool. It's like you were saying earlier, when you have that feeling where it's growing so big, it's hard to keep track of. We get that same thing, Eric and I, in GopherCon, when somebody in Brazil sends us an email and says, hey, we want to do a GopherCon in Brazil. Yes, please go do that.
Right. Yeah.
That's awesome.
That's exactly it.
I mean, anything that gets more people involved is always a good thing. And,
yep. I agree.
More conferences, more meetups, more blogs, more podcasts.
I think there's also a good opportunity to break some misconceptions. Like, there are additional opportunities to break misconceptions here, because there are so many misconceptions that women cannot program. Or even we ourselves look at ourselves and say, oh, maybe I cannot program, or maybe I can program, but I cannot be great programmer. And there is a sense that Go is a low-level language. It's not as low-level as C, but it can be used for low-level systems development. And there is an additional misconception that women cannot do systems-level programming. I don't know if you agree that this exists, but I have seen it. So with Go we can help break these myths.
Yeah, I think in STEM in general, there's a lot of that being critical of other genders and their ability to do the job. And I think it's naive.
But it exists. So
that's one of the things that I love about the Go community so much, is that sort of when those things pop up, people seem to be sort of all over it. Like, that's really not okay. And I love how much time and energy that people like Andrew Durand and Jason Bubarel have put into the code of conduct. Like, we were going, like, our code of conduct thread went on for months, just because people were so passionate about trying to make sure that Go was so inclusive and that everyone felt safe in the Go community. And I really thank them for that.
Yeah, that I really applaud that effort as well. I think that was a fantastic thing that happened. And I mean, in general too, right? Like, I know Carlisi and I have had conversations about this before. It's just everybody be nice to each other. Like, what's hard about that, you know? And that was one of the things I loved about this community when I came into it, because I don't have a master's degree or PhD in comp sci. Like, I'm not a highly academic programmer, but there were these PhD people all chatting up in mailing lists and stuff, and perfectly, happy to help and answer questions, and just their love of the language. They wanted to share that with people. And I think that we should do that. Whoever it is that's trying to join our community, we should be as welcoming as possible.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think since we started sort of being really inclusive and being aware of that, so when we were so small, I really think that it's going to help us as we grow to maintain that sort of a sense of inclusivity and safety, as opposed to other languages who are sort of trying to tack it on, like, after they've grown a lot. It's a lot harder, or it seems a lot harder.
So for the women who are listening to the podcast or listening live, if they go to womenwhogo.org, they can see a list of chapters. Will that give them the ability to find when the next meetings are?
Yes, exactly. There are a list of all of the meetup pages, or in Tokyo's case, the Con Pass. There's a Twitter account for each chapter, and some of them have Facebooks, and they're in Slacks. And there are links for all of those on the womenwhogo.org site.
And you said for people interested in potentially starting their own chapters, the best thing to do was email you at hello@womenwhogo.org.
Exactly.
Okay. Awesome. And
Great topic.
Yeah. And I think on that note, I think that we are just about out of time for this episode. So unfortunately, we get to say our goodbyes. But before we do that, we typically do the whole Free Software Friday hashtag, where each of us just kind of briefly mentions a project that we're kind of grateful for, just to give support to the project and its contributors, or some of these things that we use every single day, because sometimes a thank you is just good to give back, even if you can't contribute code. So with that being said, who wants to kick this thing off?
I'll start it off. So my Free Software Friday shout out this week is to the 1,000+ people who have contributed to Docker. I still love Docker as a build tool and a deploy tool. Docker's a lot of fun, and it has made the easy things easier and some of the hard things more accessible, and caused me to lose a little bit of hair every once in a while. But I love Docker. So thank you, Docker people.
I'm going to shout out to the folks at Apiary writing the API blueprint spec. It's really awesome, and you guys have been very accommodating of all of my documentation change requests.
That's awesome. Carlicia?
I will, first of all, I have two today. But real quick, give a shout out to remotemeetup.golangbridge.org is the Go Remote Meetup initiative that a few people are coming around to. Is what the name says. If you want to give a talk online and reach people who are not in your physical community, hop on there. We'll schedule a talk. I'm part of it too, so I'm saying, wait, this is dear to my heart. I love it, especially because I'm not in a big tech center. San Diego is pretty good, but it's not Boston or San Francisco. So I'm looking forward to this. And people who want to see these talks and presentations and demos and tutorials and hopefully pair programming sessions, I have people here in San Diego who want to do that. Just sign up and subscribe and you'll get notified. And we have some stuff there already and more coming. And the other one that I've been meaning to say for the longest time is the SourceGraph Chrome extension. Install it on your computer and then go to GitHub. And when you look at code, it's going to be magic. You just hover your mouse over functions and constants, and you get all sort of information, extra information that you don't have to hop to other places to see. And there is a mini tutorial video that they have, and we will include that on the show notes. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, we actually have Biang, one of the co-founders of SourceGraph, lined up for an episode. So that will be coming up as well.
Yes.
For me this week, and hopefully I pronounce this correctly, because I don't think I've ever heard anybody say it, but is Rofi, which is a kind of a application launcher and window switcher for Linux. And I use that while I'm in i3 to open up new programs instead of the good old D menu. What's that?
Yeah. +1. Rofi's awesome.
Yeah. And it recently had a new release that it brought a lot more features and made it look a lot prettier. So I've been having a blast with it. So with that said, I want to thank everybody. I want to thank the panel, Brian and Carlicia, and I certainly want to thank Sarah for coming on the show. I want to thank everybody who's listening now and everybody who will be listening when these podcasts drop. Definitely share this show with your fellow Go programmers. Best way to subscribe would be to go to gotime.fm, and we will also have a weekly email newsletter coming out that you can do that. We're on Twitter as well at GoTimeFM. With that said, thanks everybody, and we'll see you next week.
Glad to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.